Hi, I'm Nino Gonzalez, and welcome to another episode of Making Sense. And as we are approaching midterm here in our fall semester at the college, and I am teaching my students about cash and checking accounts and savings accounts and the difference between bank and credit unions, and also the difference between debit and credit cards, I still notice that our students have quite a bit of confusion. And if our students have quite a bit of confusion, I'm sure a lot of the community members also might share in that confusion. So I'd like to take a moment to go over some of the differences between a credit union and the bank, a debit card and a credit card, and also how to keep a paycheck budget, and we'll go through that so you can set that up on your own and stay within the amount of money that you have within each paycheck. So let's get started first of all between the difference between a debit card and a credit card. And if you look at them, unless it says the word debit on it, which some debit cards do, there's really no difference. They're issued either by Visa or MasterCard through your financial institution, whether it be a bank or a credit union. So let's talk about the difference between those. A credit card is actually the issuer is extending you a line of credit. And depending on your credit worthiness, that is going to also depend on how much credit you receive. And so what you are doing is you are borrowing money for a specific purchase, and you promise to pay it off within a certain amount of time. Hopefully you can pay it off within the next billing cycle, but sometimes it might take you several months to pay that off. But one of the things we don't want to do is get too much in credit card debt where we're paying for something over several years for a purchase that we made maybe 3 years ago. So a credit card is a line of credit, and you can only use it up to that line of credit that the issuer has given you. Now, a debit card is different. A debit card is tied to your savings account and your checking account, and you can only use it for the amount that is in those accounts. So it is linked directly to those accounts. So you're not being issued a line of credit. It's basically you're paying cash for it. And it can also be used anywhere where a credit card can be used. And sometimes you might even have to enter a PIN number to complete the transaction. So on the surface, if you take a look at a credit card and a debit card, they basically look the same, but one is linked to the money that you actually have, and the other one is not linked to the money that you actually have right now, but to credit that somebody is extending to you. So what happens that I see a lot of individuals, and as I talk to my students, getting into trouble is with debit cards, especially because they look up, and I know I do as well. We look at our accounts online, or now we might have an app that shows us how much money we have right now as of this instance. And that's the point. As of this instance, it might show, let's say I have $250. So I can really take out $250 right now, but if I do, have I taken into consideration any transactions that are pending, any transactions that might come maybe later that night or the next morning, and then I will not have the funds to cover that. So I see that happening with a lot of individuals in that they check their balance and they think that's how much they have available to spend. Well, it is as of that point in time, but have we taken into consideration all those scheduled payments that you made or automatic payments that are going to come through? And that's one of the things that later on in the show I want to talk to you about, forming a little paycheck budget and organizing that by date so we don't run into those problems. Because every time, if you don't take those things into consideration, then you're going to be overdrawn. And if you're overdrawn, I think the fees are running now from $35 to $40 for each occurrence that your account is overdrawn. Let's also talk about paying at the pump. And I know I have discussed this in previous shows, but that also gets a lot of debit card users into trouble. So when you pay at the pump is automatically going to authorize in some gas stations, not all, but in some up to $75 to $100, because the pump doesn't know how much your car or truck is going to take to fill up. So if I have $250 in my checking account and I use my debit card, now I only have $150 if $100 is authorized. And that authorization will not be taken off until maybe 5 to 7 days later. So I'm going to be out that money, and if I have transactions that are coming through and I didn't take that into account, we could be faced with some overdrawn amounts there. So we got to be careful and look at the policies that each convenience store or each gas station has and how much is being authorized. What I would recommend is that you walk inside, and you can still pay with your debit card, but prepay for a certain amount, such as I want to put in $30 and I want to authorize it for that amount, and it will only be authorized for that amount and not for $75 to $100, which you might not be putting into your tank, and you're going to be left off the difference for about 5 to 7 days. And a lot of people are not aware of that, and then their account gets overdrawn. As a matter of fact, I had a student in one of my class telling me that that situation happened to her, and another student who works at a financial institution letting me know also that she gets a lot of customers that come in exactly for that same reason. But there's not much the financial institution can do, and there's not much the gas station can do. So please be aware of the policies. Sometimes they post signs right at their pumps that it's going to be authorized for a specific amount. Another thing that happens is, let's say we use that debit card at a restaurant or maybe at a bar, and what happens is that you forgot to take into consideration the tip amount, and you write in a tip amount, and maybe you might not have enough money in there because it's just going to be authorized for the amount of the meal or whatever it is that you spent at the bar. But the tip amount is not going to be authorized until later. And that could also cause some overdraws if you don't have sufficient funds to cover that amount that you might not have thought of when you were actually conducting that transaction. And I've seen that happen quite a few times. And one of the suggestions that I make, especially to my students, is try to avoid using debit and credit cards at bars, because sometimes that's where a lot of these numbers are stolen. Not only that, sometimes we lose track of how much we're drinking and we could be overcharged. If we fail to put in a tip amount, I've heard of instances where servers will automatically write in a tip amount there that you might not be aware of. So it's best to pay as you go, especially in those situations. So those are some of the differences between a debit card and a credit card. So when is it good to use a credit card? A credit card is good for hotel reservations and car rentals, because when you make a hotel reservation, usually the hotel is going to authorize the amount of the stays plus any amount for incidentals. And so if we're staying 3 nights and let's say they're charging us $100 per night, they're going to authorize it for $300 plus maybe $25 to $50 extra per night for incidentals, whether we use them or not. And that release is not going to take effect until you actually check out, and maybe 5 to 7 days after you check out. So you don't want to have that money tied up from your checking account, and it's best to have it tied up on your credit card, and then when the bill comes in, pay it off. Car rental agencies usually will not rent out a car without a credit card because it's going to be pre-authorized for the full amount of the rental plus some extras. So make sure that you use a credit card as well. Some car rental agencies will take a debit card, but they will usually run a credit report to make sure you're credit worthy to be able to rent a car. So some of us also like using credit cards for rewards, but if the rewards are not going to pay off if you carry a balance. So it's important that the purchases that we make to get maybe cash back or rewards, we pay off that balance every month to make the rewards or the cash back worthwhile. Otherwise, the interest that you're paying on that balance is going to be way much more than the rewards that you are using. So those are some of the differences between a debit card and a credit card, and I still run into individuals, especially students, that don't know the difference between both. So as we are discussing these concepts, they also don't understand how a bank looks at your money, how the bank looks at your money. So what I have here and what I'm going to be discussing is a little bit of accounting, and just trying to keep it very basic. But what I have here and what I'm going to show you is I have a picture of a T account. And the picture of a T account is what you see there is just in the shape of a T, and we put the account title on top. And the left-hand side of the T account is called a debit, and the right-hand side of the T account is called a credit. So debit and credit does not mean going up or down. It's based on what type of account we're talking about. So if I have cash, for example, that is known as an asset. And an asset is something that we own. So for example, cash, property, vehicles, furniture, jewelry, all of those are assets. So just like businesses have assets, individuals have assets. And one of the assets that we have is cash. So if cash is an asset, a debit will make it go up and a credit will make it go down. And that's on your viewpoint because it's an asset to you. So when I deposit money, I'm debiting my account. And when I take money out of my checking account, I'm going to credit my account. But now let's take a look at how the bank does it. The bank views your account as a liability. So, and a liability is something that we owe. And the liability is still the left-hand side is going to be a debit and the right-hand side is going to be a credit. But a liability behaves the opposite way. A debit makes it go down and a credit makes it go up. So sometimes when we take a look at our bank statements and or even online, it says we credited your account for this amount. Well, when they're crediting your account, they're making your account go up. And when they're debiting your account, they're making your account go down because the money does not belong to the bank. You're just using their services. The money belongs to you. And to you, that money is an asset. And that's where sometimes we get some of the confusion with these debits and credits because on my side, in order to make my money go up, I'm going to be debiting it. But on the bank side, they're going to be crediting it to make that money go up. So if we think about this, if the bank is debiting my account to make the money go down, that's why we get the name debit card. Because every time you use your debit card, they are debiting your account, the liability account. Remember, the liability account, a debit makes it go down and a credit makes it go up. So every time you're using your debit account, your debit card, your account is going down because they're taking money away. And that's where we get the term debit card because the bank views your account as a liability. So just a little bit of basics on how you view your cash and how the bank views your cash, and a little bit of a primer on accounting. But I'll come back and talk more about the differences on credit unions and banks on the second half of Making Sense. So stay tuned. Welcome to the second half of Making Sense. And in the first half, I was giving you just a little bit of an accounting primer on cash and how we view it and how the bank views it and the difference between a debit card and a credit card. Now, one of the questions that has come up in class and also from individuals that I talk to is that they don't know the difference between a credit union and a bank. Although they offer similar services, and usually for individuals, we might not even know the difference because of the services that they provide are identical. There are some primary differences. So let's take a look at this. A credit union is made up of members, and each member is an owner of that credit union. So if I become a member of the credit union, I'm considered a member and I'm considered an owner. With a bank, I'm just considered a customer, and I am not considered an owner. So I am just using their services. Also, credit unions are more regional, in a specific region, and can be restricted, although the restrictions have eased because of laws that have taken effect in several years back. But they used to have restrictions on who could become members. So for example, we might have here in El Paso, GECU. Well, the original name was Government Employees Credit Union, and that's how we come up with GECU. But that was basically restricted to people that worked in certain areas of the government and their family members and dependents. Or we could have White Sands Federal Credit Union. Well, that was restricted to individuals that worked at White Sands and their family members and dependents. Nowadays, they've opened that membership up. So now any one of us can become a member as long as we're within the areas that they serve, usually the county of El Paso, and they might even go maybe 10 or 25 miles outside of the county. So you can only become a member if you work, you live within that area. A bank is much different. A bank, I don't have to be living in a specific region, and a bank serves not only a region nationally, and it can be international, where credit unions are not. So credit unions have been known to be more restrictive in membership, although they've opened that up to members of that county or the area that they serve. So credit union members are owners, and each member gets to vote for who's going to run that credit union, which is going and create policy, which is the board of directors. And the members also can run for the board. Banks are owned by stockholders, and as a customer of a bank, unless I own stock in that particular financial institution, I am not considered an owner of the bank, and I also cannot run for the board. The board is usually elected by other directors and by the stockholders. Another key thing is that credit unions are not for profit, and banks are for profit. So what's the difference between for-profit and non-for-profit? Well, a credit union is going to act on behalf of their members in giving them better rates, giving as far as loans, as far as savings, giving them a little bit more financial education to help them become financial literate. And banks are usually going to be, sometimes it's harder to get a loan, the rates are going to be higher, and they're usually focused more on bigger customers, wealthier customers, people that have maybe significant amount of money or big businesses. And so credit unions are focused more on the community and the members that they serve and what those members need. So that's why it's called usually what we would call a cooperative. And basically, based on the members that they have, and as those members make deposits, and those members then, as that money becomes available, then they offer that money as loans to their members at better rates. And usually when you have a savings account, it's usually called a share account because you own part of that credit union, and instead of getting paid interest, you get paid dividends, which is a form of interest because you are considered part member and part owner of that credit union. So also, banks usually don't cooperate with one another because it's competitive and they're for profit. Credit unions are known to cooperate with each other. For example, there is credit union service centers and the co-op ATM network, where if you're a member of a specific credit union and they participate within this co-op ATM network, you can actually use ATMs of other credit unions and not be charged a service charge. So there's more cooperation between credit unions than there are with banks. So those are some of the differences between credit unions and banks. So what should we use? It all depends. It depends on your preference. It depends on the convenience. But if you're just an ordinary individual who's using checking, savings, maybe getting an auto loan, maybe getting a mortgage, then either one of these would work. Which one is going to be more beneficial to you? Which one will give you the better rates? And which one is more convenient? And especially when it comes to withdrawing money, branches, or ATM network, what is the best fit for you? Now, also, banks usually have higher service charges than credit unions do because they are acting more on behalf of the members. So the decision is really up to you. If you either go with a credit union or a bank, you're going to get the similar type of services that you need. It just all depends what is it that you want, what your goals are, and how much convenience you want. So now let's talk a little bit about setting up a payroll budget. And here I am putting up a paycheck budget, and this I just grabbed it off the internet. But basically, if we take a look at these columns, they have the expense where you can write them in, the due date, how much is expected. Now we want to do this before we get our paycheck to make sure we're going to have enough money to cover the bills that we have, and then also we can compare it to the actual and see how much we're off. Usually we can estimate our bills from month to month because some of them stay the same. And we usually know what our water bill, our electric bill, our natural gas bill are going to be. And some of those are going to be higher during the summer months, and some of them will be lower during the winter months, but higher during those months. So we sort of already know. And so it is very easy to form a paycheck budget. So here is a sample of a paycheck budget that I did, and this is exactly what I do in my personal life. And so if we take a look at this, we started off here with a beginning balance, and I put a beginning balance there of $1,500. Then on October the 6th, and I'm organizing this by date, I get a paycheck, and that paycheck is for $542.26. And if you notice it, I listed it as a negative number. Why? Because I'm doing this in Excel. And so and on the running balance column, as I copy down the formula, I'm basically adding I'm taking the 1,500 and then subtracting what goes out. So instead of changing the formula, I put the deposit as a negative because two negatives will give me a positive. And that way I don't have to change or modify my formula. So from that 1,500, it grows to be $2,042.26. Now, right away on that date, as you can see, I have $50 going into savings, which is approximately about 10% of the paycheck. So the very first thing you want to do is pay yourself, and right away. And if you can do that automatically, the best, because out of sight, out of mind, and it's into your savings account. And we need to start building those savings. So now on October the 10th, I've got a loan payment coming out. And then also on October the 10th, I have 2 life insurance premiums coming out. Then I don't have anything until the 17th, where I have long-term disability insurance coming out. Then on the 20th, I have a cell phone bill coming out. And then what happens is I have another paycheck coming in on October 20th. So as you can see, now my balance had fallen to $1,514.54, but now it's grown back up to $2,056.80. And right away after that paycheck, then I save almost a little bit less than 10%, but $50. If it was exactly 10%, it would be $54.22. But putting away $50, and then now I have an internet payment, I have a car payment going out on the 25th, then I have a cable bill going out on the 27th, home insurance on the 28th, gas service on the 28th, I have a Discover card payment on the 31st, El Paso Electric on the 31st, gym membership on November 1st, and then here comes another paycheck. And as you can see, my balance fell from my last paycheck to this to $868.66, but now with a paycheck it's grown back up to 1,410.92. And what we can do, if we can do this in Excel, we can roll it over for several pay periods. I do mine usually about 4 to 6 months out. And also, please do not forget those unexpected things that come up, such as auto registration. You know when your auto registration is going to come up, and that usually runs now about $90. And so make sure you factor that in. Or auto insurance. You know, I pay my auto insurance every 6 months, so it's not on a monthly basis. So here, for example, the last item I have on November 7th, I have a $350 payment going for auto insurance for 6 months. Sometimes we forget about those things that don't happen every month, but you know they're going to come up. So once you roll it forward, you can just copy, you can just paste, and make any modifications. And what will this do? Well, what this will do is avoid you from going to the bank or looking up on your app or looking up online and saying, oh, this is how much I have. Yes, this is how much you have as of this date. But have you taken into consideration all the other payments that are coming out? So that way you will not be overdrawn. And make sure you label it by dates, so that way you know when that money is going to be coming out. Now, as you can see here, I specifically, after each paycheck, I put savings there. It's real important for you to pay yourself first. Now, what else can we do with this paycheck budget? Well, as I can see, I have some money left over. So what do I want to do with that money? Do I have some debt I need to pay off and maybe put an additional payment towards that debt? Or maybe I should start investing and look at different investment alternatives that I have other than savings. And as we've mentioned in previous shows, we're not saving enough. And I had a guest here from a previous show, and he was from the Federal Reserve Bank. And one of the stats that he gave me, I will not forget, is that we are usually about $400 away from a financial disaster. So a $400 emergency will actually cause you a financial disaster. Do you want to be in that situation? You know, have at least $500 saved up. Then let's make it up to $700, then to $1,000, because we all know we're going to need that car battery. And that car batteries nowadays cost $100 or above, okay? But if you have that money saved up, that little problem does not become a mountain. And one of the biggest things that causes stress are money issues. And by having just a little bit of savings, that's going to give you a peace of mind for when these little problems happen, and you won't make them into mountains. So I want to urge you to at least start saving. Let's start 200, then let's move it to 500, 700, 1,000, until you have enough, hopefully, to cover 3 months worth of expenses in case you're laid off from your job or something happens. So I hope all this information helped you, and let's get back into getting our finances together and preparing a paycheck budget and knowing the differences between credit unions and banks, credit cards and debit cards, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Making Sense. Have a great day.